Well, hello. Welcome back to Every Kind of I Do. Now, today's going to be another unique episode because, well, first of all, my cat just joined me. And also, I want to talk to you about the Saguaros. Please forgive me if I say it wrong. It is very confusing to see it spelled one way and then said a different way. It's fine. It's the cactuses that look like this. Yay. I remember this was my first of a couple of trips to Arizona. That's like one state I had never really truly visited until this time. And when I was still building out my portfolio for weddings and things like that, I thought to myself, what kind of a setup would I do if I only had a short amount of time in Arizona? And so I called up my friend Lizzie, who has some family in town, and I was able to work with them to go out into the Saguaros and do a couple of photos. Now, the inspiration today, although this is a real couple, but this is not really necessarily like an elopement or a wedding or anything. But what I wanted to show you is the possibilities, right? So, and I'm all about these possibilities. If you want to keep it small and quiet and just out of everybody's way and you want to elope in the middle of the desert, okay, then you figure out how to do that. So let's get into this real quick. So I was lucky enough they came with a couple of outfit ideas. It was really sweet. Again, this is a real couple. So they were helping me with, whatever I wanted to put together. But honestly, I'd never photographed these, before the saguaros and the cactus life in Arizona. So my first trip to Arizona, I barely got to see anything. I was more of in the mountain range. And then when I got here, I was in between Phoenix and Tucson areas. I actually got to go up inside one of the parks and just kind of like, wander around and look around. But I also know that there is a different climate there. Like if you're not native to Arizona, then you're not used to the desert. So I had to really be careful about how much time I was out. Did I have water? All these other extra things that, I wouldn't have to think about honestly here in, North Texas. But in Arizona, it's just such a different climate. But it was just stunningly beautiful and it was so neat. They just don't even look real. They look like, to me, they look like people. Like they had their own personalities. They all had different shapes and they were all just kind of hanging out together. But as far as it goes for, let's say you're going to go elope or you're going to have an engagement session and you've picked your spot, and this is just kind of what I wanted to sit with y'all today is what would you do if you wanted to elope or have a session in the Saguaro fields? And so obviously with this context, we're dressing in lighter colored clothing anyway because if you wear the darker clothing, we've already talked about that in a previous episode that you might get hotter faster if you wear, say, a darker tone than these lighter tones. And I actually love that both of them have a hat on. Like these hats are like not just for aesthetic, they're actually probably to help, with sun flares and glares, right? So this at least kind of like keeps it really shaded just a touch. There wasn't a lot of shade in general when I went out to these places, but I think, when you look at these images, really, it's all about the landscape that you're in. And you have these yellow tones, you have the gravel, you would think it would be mostly neutral, but there is a lot of color in the desert. So, and this is another thing I wanted to show is, now we have our hats off. We've got a couple of different ideas that we're working with. She's got this beautiful pleat in her little dress here. So we're kind of working, not only does she have this long, beautiful hair, but she's got this, she's got the little peekaboo leg over there. They're genuinely having a good time. It was a lot of fun to work with them. And, just enough of the swallows in the picture, you can see that you're not in a normal landscape, right? So think about that when you're thinking about photography in general and whatever location. This is really just like whatever location that you want for your elopement or your portrait session. Think about the landscape as a huge piece of it too, because what's the point of going to this beautiful landscape and you don't get any of the landscape in the photo? Like, like, say you go to a building and say you pick somewhere in New York City and you only get photos of like yourself in front of the door. It doesn't show the scope of where you got married or where you're doing your session. I'm all about zooming in and making sure we got some really, got some pretty faces. But let's just say we zoomed in like this, right? And you can kind of see they're somewhere cool, but you can't really get a feel for where they're at. Let's just say this cactus wasn't even there. But when you zoom out and you have a medium width portrait, you can kind of say, okay, oh, they're somewhere kind of cool, you know? So, and there's a difference between using the sun as like a side light or a backlight. This one I'm using it as a front light, but sometimes in the desert with no clouds whatsoever, it's strong sun. You don't want to look into the sun. But what I did want to do is highlight them looking towards the light. And there's something about it, it changes the image dramatically. Did you see the difference between what was earlier and what is now? Is this is a little bit more backlit. This is little bit more front lit. Do you see the difference? So it also, you can see the textures of this second dress differently. We also have a little bit of flowers over here that we added to the mix. He still has a nice white shirt on. And I wanted to try something different with the Swaro here. I was like, some of them, depending on where we could walk, and what we had access to, obviously you're not going to be like jumping all over them. You're not supposed to. So we had to be able to position ourselves wherever we were walking in this park to make sure that we could stand next to it or around it so I could photograph it. And it was much more challenging than I expected. There's a lot of pros out there that probably live in Arizona. This is their everyday life. For me, never having been there, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have to play around till I figure it out. And this is what I ended up doing. And this is the same for your portrait session. Like, not every single thing is going to turn out exactly right. Or, when you're getting engaged or having a secret proposal or you're eloping, like you're going to have an officiant most likely in your photos as well. And specifically, if you're going to do, say, your own vows and you're going to do some rings and all those things. So think about the photography that way too. Is like, how much do you really want to capture where you're at? This is more of like, this is a Jen photo that I just wanted to have a very beautiful, iconic cactus meets bride kind of feel going on here. I had a couple of props that I had access to. She had this, this second gown here, but I borrowed this headpiece so we could feel like it was kind of like a statement. And I just kind of like it's very striking. And I turned the editing just slightly off color tones just to make it super interesting. And as you can see at the very bottom, that's actually shadows coming in. So at this point of the day, like the sun's moving around, the shadows keep moving, but I tried to work with it to where you can still see a lot of the cactus in the sun, the bright, bright, bright sunlight. And then also you get her mostly well lit, except all the way down to the bottom, you can see the shadows start to take everything away there. But you know what? I'm not mad at that photo. I am not mad at it. It's lovely. It's strong. It's powerful. And this is how I feel about when I travel is like I want to take in the landscape. I want to take in what can I do with this scape that would be personal to me and personal to my couples. And this is kind of like this is what I want to leave you with today is wherever your locations are, whatever is special to you, see if you can add that in as a highlight to the whole thing. Like make sure that if you're a fan of these guys, that you're adding them into your photo session. If you're a fan of mountains, ocean, beaches, make sure you add that into your photo session and make sure it's like a wide scape, not just a tiny little bit. Oh, here's a tiny little bit of sand. No, see if you can like really go wide with it and have some fun. All right, well, that's it for this episode. So I am so happy you're here and I'm so glad you stayed to listen to this. But remember, there's no right way to say I do. Just go the do. Go do the I do's, y'all. I'll talk to you later.